Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. I'm Doc T, and I'm interviewing Merja Sumiloff, whose Finnish name escapes my British roots. And I apologize. But Merja came to me because of a mutual friend, Linda Pirelli, and we have ideas and concepts about how we connect with horses. And I've always said to people who say, wow, you're really good at connecting with horses. How can I learn that? And my first question to them is, well, how good are you connecting with your parents, your siblings, your spouse, or the guy standing behind the counter at the convenience store? And inevitably, they all said, not that good. So I said, you'll start with your own species. And Merja, you have definitely gone into the species of humans and helping them. And through that, you've been helping people learn to discover who they are. And with the help of horses, they become better communicators. So I'm going to dump kind of that into your lap because I've read your book, Safe Spaces. And I find that horses love to have safe spaces as much as humans do. And once we understand that we're safe, the horses tend to relax. So go ahead. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit better than that and tell everybody more about what you do?
Dr. T, it's so great to be here with you. I've been listening to you for quite some time, so thank you for having me, first of all. Yes, indeed. My name is Merja Sumiloff, and I am a Happy Horse, Happy Life instructor. So I work with my mentor, Linda Pirelli. I'm based here in the Hunter Valley in Eastern Australia. So I'm a little bit further away from the Florida crowd, although I do try and visit every year at the Happy Horse Conference. Yes. I have been working in personal development industry for quite a while and written programs and hypotheses of extensions of works of Carl Jung and Isabel Briggs-Myers and Catherine Cook-Briggs. For those of you who are in the personal development sphere, you know whom I'm talking about. And of course, with my background in horsemanship and working with horses, working in big competition yards, competing myself, having high aspirations in eventing. I've noticed that exact link that you mentioned around horses and humans and the relationships between, and how we can learn from different parts of our lives and bring those skills to a whole different area of our lives. And I often say that the horses can be our biggest teacher if we learn how to listen. So,
that big if. So you're early in the morning over there. My son lives 12 time zones away too, up in Indonesia, north of you. So I want to thank you for getting up early and talking to people. I'm sipping on my water. You're sipping on your coffee. If I have any more coffee, I'll be up for another day or two. The big if, I found that people have a difficulty listening.
Yeah.
And pausing and reflecting back. And so many people have gone over this root issue. We all tend to react. And I think you have something here. I actually read your book and underlined it because I had it in a form. You see, I actually underlined things. So I really paid attention to it. And how you show up matters. I get that. I mean, that's the title of one of your chapters. And I was drawn in to how you try to take people with their traumas and empower them. And if you could just touch on that, but not with such severe traumas, but these little traumas, like simple, you're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not going to tell you my whole story, but we all have these little traumas.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got over them. But you've helped so many people get over these little things. And I see the people coming into the stalls and they bring in all this energy, these traumas, these blocks. And the horse's nostrils are flared, the eyes bug out, and they're just staring at it. And I walk into the same horse and they just melt. So, and I've had difficulty explaining this. So I'll give you the floor because nobody wants to hear me talk about this. I'm the experts here. I mean, tell me more.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, as a fellow nerd, horse nerd, I'm putting that label onto you because I've listened to your podcast long enough to know that we're all on the same page. If you look deeply enough into anything, really, patterns begin to emerge. Like, you don't actually have to be a scientist. I have science background. You obviously have a science background. You don't have to be a scientist to make extensive analysis and take deep dives into and write reports and papers on these things. You can actually realize that if you put yourself into enough situations, patterns begin to emerge. The same thing tends to start to show up in quite a reliable way. And when that happens, so when you begin to notice that if I do this, then this happens, every person can begin to observe themselves and observe horses on a whole different level. But if I just put that observation hat on for now, I've noticed that the biggest common denominator with people who elicit that type of a reaction from a horse, where the horse is clearly having taking a little step back and not necessarily wanting to connect with you, the common denominator tends to be that the person is not integrated. So we can talk about trauma. We can talk about big T trauma, like the traumas that are life-changing, where you might end up with post-traumatic stress and big challenges to deal with for the rest of your life. Or we can talk about little T traumas, like, anybody who was born, anybody who's 40 and over will have heard children should be seen and not heard. That can be a little T trauma that can show up for the rest of your life if you don't attend to that. The severity of the trauma doesn't matter, in my experience, as much as how integrated the person is within themselves. And I call this approach the 4 people within, because we have 4 predominant cognitive ways that we show up in our interactions with the world. 2 in which we make decisions, and 2 in which we collect information. So if we have been told many times that we're not worthy, and we have accepted that as a decision, those 4 people within us, some of them believe that, and others won't believe that. And we have this internal warring going on in ourselves that we then bring as baggage to our horse. That war is what causes the horse to take a step back and go, like, I don't feel comfortable with this because you're actually not grounded. You're not going to be the leader that I need today, at least today. And if it goes on many times, of course, we can condition our horses to see ourselves as a threat, no matter how we show up. So,
yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I've been saying, I wrote a book a long time ago, The 10 Irrefutable Laws of Horsemanship.
Yeah.
And I discussed those 4 personalities that Hippocrates way back when talked about.
Yes.
And I still use those fancy words, choleric, sanguine, melancholy, and phlegmatic.
Yes.
And other people have taken them and gone introvert, extrovert, etc.
Yep.
And I've used them and found that I have to get my dial of all 4 personalities all lubricated and quickly adjusting.
Yes.
So if I want to be the life of the party and I crank that up, but I'm with somebody who doesn't want to be the life of the party, they're very serious. They're into a sense of order, and I'm in chaos. I'm never going to relate to them. And I have to tone that one down and bring up the other one and adjust so that energy comes out. And I think most people know who they are, but they don't know that they can change that at a moment's notice to reflect back to the animal or the person what they are, because they're just as stuck as you are. And if 2 stuck people come in and they're on the wrong, on the same track, you're going to collide. And we can't do that. We have to, well, I've seen so many horses, and I walk in and I adjust myself so quickly. It's like within milliseconds. And I had the owner say to me, "Wow, you nailed my horse's personality perfectly." And I said, "Yeah, because I've tuned in to listen to this personality. Our personalities ooze all over. I mean, in fact, when I see people or horses, I see this huge bubble of energy."
Yes.
And I say, "Okay, how can I match that?" And people say, "Gosh, you can walk up to anybody and talk to them." And everybody else, "I'm so scared. I can't talk to anybody."
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and kudos to you for being able to do that and writing those irrefutable laws of horsemanship, and especially the first 2 ones really spoke to me with, a horse can kill you, and it's likely to be your own horse that will, or, your own horse can also be the one that kills you. And it's like, if you look at your relationship with your own horse, as an example of this, anybody tuning in, and you look at your relationship with, say, your partner or your children, how you show up into those relationships matters. And if you're not present, you can put yourself into very dangerous situations without meaning to.
I'm sorry to laugh, but duh, of course it matters.
Sure. Sure. So then I see our relationships with our horses and with human beings like bank accounts. So you either put energy and presence into the account, or you just keep withdrawing it. And if you keep withdrawing it, of course, eventually you'll end up with no money in the bank account. And, I'm sure it's been called, what's the call? There's a
emotional bankruptcy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Emotional bankruptcy that you bring to any relation. Then who wants to be a part of that?
Right.
Also, when we don't have the capacity to regulate our own emotions, and most people, like 70% plus people on the planet, are get their sense of power from their emotions first and foremost, and then other places. If we don't have that sense of emotional regulation with ourselves, then we have zero hope in helping other people regulate themselves. Partner, horse, if we show up at the barn and we're upset and the horse is upset for whatever reason, we just get into this more and more deep obsession about the horse is the problem. You're being emotional, when in fact, you're bringing your own baggage and forcing it on the horse. And we know how horses feel about being trapped, whether it's emotional baggage or
horses and people. If I keep saying to someone, you're such a big problem. Your horse is a problem. That horse is a problem. All of you are a problem. The country's got a problem. The world's got a problem. Yeah, I like to keep it simple. It's me.
Yeah.
And if I can't adjust me, and that's the hardest job, because it's easier to blame everyone else, isn't it?
Sure. Sure. And you are literally the only person that you can adjust, that you have power over adjusting. Like even our horses, they are quite, like we can, if we offer good leadership, we can manage our horses' emotional landscape and teach them to regulate their emotions and know that if they go up, if they get scared, if they're with us, they can relax. So we can quite easily manipulate horses' emotional landscapes compared to other humans. But the ultimate power is within us to regulate ourselves, no matter what anybody says or does or doesn't do.
We have a big job in this podcast here because we can talk about regulating emotions, and most people have problems and they don't know how to get around. And somebody listening to this might be saying, "Oh yeah, I got a problem," or they might even say, "No, I don't have any problems," and yet they're still not being successful in building relationship with people and horses. So I guess I'm moving over toward the section of how. How do we, well, number one, recognize, and number two, how can we make it simple? Find the people who have a list of to-dos. Well, I'm going to go in the stall and I'm going to start with number one, go to two, number three, number four, number five. And by then the horse is gone out the other end of the barn, says, "See."
Yes. Yeah.
What's this instantaneous switch that I've got that I can't explain? What is this? How do we do this?
Well, you are probably very talented in this particular way. So pivoting. So if this doesn't work, then I'll pivot to that. If that doesn't work, pivot to this. I think what you've just got really good at that over time. You might even have natural acuity for that. And not every person has that. So we tend to take for granted the things that we're really good at, and we think that everybody else is or should be as well. But in fact, usually when we think of something, why doesn't that person know how to do that? And I'm not saying you're doing that, but every person sees this in other people. Why don't they just do this? It's not necessarily that the other person doesn't just do that. You might just be really good at that. So you might be really good, Doc T, on this particular thing. And that is absolutely fantastic. And I find that a lot of veterinarians, I mentioned before we hit the record that I have a lot of veterinarians in the family and in my inner circle, and I appreciate you so much, all the work that you do, and you have the toughest jobs, one of the toughest jobs in the planet or on the planet. So I cannot thank you enough for everything that you do. But a lot of veterinarians from my own research and over the years working with veterinarians, is that a lot of you are naturally introspective. So you are naturally problem solvers. And also, if you were to talk about it in the Myers-Briggs way, a lot of veterinarians are introverted, intuitive feelers. So you're already openly feeling, or you're open to emoting and sharing emotional space with your patients. You're already introspective about what the problem could be. You're already natural problem solvers, but you're also highly intuitive, which allows our sense of intuition, which is a pattern recognition skill, allows the horse to kind of offer their patterns for you to observe, and then you can read it much more easily than the average person. So just by the fact that you're doing that job, you're probably already quite naturally talented in those areas. Does that make sense?
Yes, because I understand from my perspective as a veterinarian, but I think most people coming up to a horse ask, how do I become intuitive? How do I become receptive to what's going on? I mean, I'm here to ride the dang thing, and it's not standing still, won't even let me mount.
Yeah. Good question. And the very first piece to that puzzle, to solving that puzzle, is allowing yourself to fail forward. You need to allow yourself to fail. Because if you don't allow yourself to fail, if you think this is how it should be and it can't go any other way, then you won't get the feedback of the data from the horse that will actually tell you what's going on for them. And now we're looping back to listening, you know.
Yeah, you got to listen to the feedback, don't you?
Yeah, we can get into those states where if we don't listen with our horse, we just start shouting. We just get louder and louder and louder and louder to a point where now it becomes dangerous, because the horse will ultimately shout with its body, and the explosion will come. And because we are smaller and some of us are not so, fast in our movements anymore, we might not get out of the way. And
I call
it
that
has to be a
crescendo.
two-way conversation. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, crescendo is, for those who don't know that word, in music, the music is made to grow louder. They call it crescendo. And the horse will crescendo because the horse and the human are trying to get louder to each other. And finally, they're screaming at each other, and it's a disaster. Yeah. And one of the senses I have is to that loudness. Is it getting louder? If it is, I back up, because I look at energy like water. It always flows to the lowest point. Everybody knows if you spill water, we've never seen water spill up. It's always going down, and we'll always go to the lowest point. And if we can get our energy down that lowest point, you have to do that feedback. You have to try something, fail, understand why it's crescendoing, and what can we do to reverse that so we decrescendo, so we make things smaller, less loud, and get our energy to the lowest possible denominator. Because the horses will love, they're like water, will flow right to your low energy state.
Yes. Or whatever the container is that you create for them. So let's just say that you have a really good relationship with your horse and you're doing dressage. You may create a container that says Piaf, and now the horse meets you at the container that you're creating for that horse in that performance. But of course, for you, if you're doing dental work, you want them to be in that low energy state, because that is where you can both perform at your best.
So that goes right back to your personalities. I want to take your energy lower. Mm-hmm. Well, you're going to do that differently for the different personalities. For the highly structured horse, you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to bend down. I'm going to touch your left forward, and I'm going to lift that hoof up because I want to see the bottom of it. And the horse says, oh, okay. But if you're there and you go to the other side, I'll never, ever forget. I was blocking the front hooves of a horse with a nerve block. And I'm poking the end of a ballpoint pen in the heels of the left fore hoof.
Yeah.
And I'm poking it, and it's pretty late, it's numb. And then, because I'm still on the left side of the horse and I'm lazy, I took my arm across and poked the heel of the right forefoot. And that horse, if these are the front hooves, did boop and clocked me right in my forehead. And if I just said, okay, I'm going to move over here and we're going to see if this one's numb, it would never have happened. But I had my agenda, and I didn't share it with the person I'm poking, or the horse. Yeah. And I got a big egg right there on my forehead. Boy, talk about getting feedback.
Well, now that you're telling me this, I'm wondering if there's a pattern emerging that we don't really start listening to the horses until we get kicked in the head, because that was actually my experience too. I also got kicked in the head and thankfully survived. And so what does it take for us to really start listening?
Great
and
question.
Really paying attention. Yeah.
What's the answer? Well, it depends on how stupid you are.
It depends how right you believe you are already. It depends on how many answers you already think that you have compared to how many questions you might have. Because if we look at the levels of consciousness, even we're always, so we have the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind. Our unconscious mind, which means the stuff we don't know about, will always be vastly bigger than our conscious mind, which is what we do know about. So I wonder if that comes down to arrogance, humility. I don't know.
Yeah. People confuse arrogance with confidence all the time. You know, same number of syllables, but confidence is knowing that you don't know everything. And arrogance is knowing that you know everything, which is impossible.
Yeah.
I see arrogant people around horses all the time. Then I see confident. And a lot of people think I'm arrogant. Well, once they get to know me, they realize that I'm not, because they look so similar.
Yes, they can look similar. Yeah.
But usually with confidence comes a degree of being humble and accepting that I could get kicked in the head if I do this. Now, what can I do to avoid that? Where the arrogance is, well, I'm just going to go in and do this.
Yeah. That was me.
You have to have 100% feedback. You have to have the listening going on 100% of the time. And I think arrogant people don't do that. They just go in there with the speaker on, they're talking instead of listening.
Yeah. If your output is higher than your intake.
Yes.
What's that thing? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
And the other thing that's stopping the 2 ears from working is what's between them.
What's it?
These are all cute expressions we've all heard, but they are so correct.
Yes. Yeah. And do we take a moment to think, not if this applies to me, but where does this apply to me? Not if I talk more than listen, but where, in which situations do I talk more than I listen? Because it's not a question of if you do something. Life's not black and white. There are situations where we all do everything that we condemn everybody else for.
All right. I know that my wife at some point is going to listen to this. And I'm almost embarrassed, and I'm not. I just use that word loosely, to tell people how long I've been married to the same person. Because I know you and others listening to this have not had that quote unquote success. But I will tell you this: the longer you get married, the less you listen. And,
how interesting.
And shut up. I know what you're trying to say. I'll finish your sentence for you. I'm the biggest guilty person in the planet. Sorry, Kathy. I know it just, and yet when we know our horses more and more, we think we know them every day. And we're not stopping and asking one simple question, which is, hey, how are you doing today? And we have to reset that approach every day. We have to say, like, I walk into a horse's stall. I did just the other day. The woman rode the horse and was finished, bathing it, and brought it in, bathing it because it was almost 100 degrees here, which is like really hot for those guys who don't know. If it's in Celsius, it's like pretty hot. 37, 40 degrees Celsius.
40, yeah. It's not over.
And it was really hot. Fans are going and everything. And she brings this horse in. Now, I've been alerted by the trainer that this horse is a difficult horse, that it doesn't like anybody touching it anywhere from its ears to its neck. If you're going to drug any horse, this is going to be the horse you're going to drug. To which I said to her, how am I going to drug it if I can't get between the ears and the neck?
Right. Slight problem there.
And so I knew that I was going to use all the skills that I have. And as soon as I walked in, the horse is, man, vet, I'm out of here. And I just stopped and say, hey, how you doing? And the horse was like, you're asking me? Really? And you just been ridden. It's pretty hot. You're probably tired. You don't want to really fight me. How can we do this without a fight? So that was him. Now, if I got into that horse first thing in the morning when it's cool, he might have a different story. Every horse has a starting point that you have to enter into their life for. And if you don't ask the simple question, hey, how you doing? I mean, it's one of the secrets, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you're entering somebody else's bubble, essentially.
Good way of putting it.
So whenever you're, like, if you're out there in the world, doesn't even have to be with horses, you go grocery shopping and you're in the aisles just kind of with your trolley. And if you find that there are people in front of you all the time, or they try to block you or something, you haven't actually been aware of their bubble. Like, what are you doing crashing into their bubble? So how aware are we? And we can practice awareness. We don't have to be with our horses to practice awareness. We can practice it everywhere. But I will say that unless you ask the horse the question, and I like to ask this of horses and people when I meet with them, is there's two questions I love. How are you feeling right now? So what's happening? Like your question, how's your day going? And what do you need right now? What is it that you need right now so that we can meet there and then walk hand in hand to the next task.
Yeah.
And what you're essentially saying, and what we talked about before, we don't listen. Well, if you don't ask questions, listening is much harder. So
that is a common thread through your book.
Yeah.
Ask questions.
Yeah.
Number one, how do you ask a question to a horse that doesn't speak? 2, what questions do you ask? And 3, I'm scared to ask questions. How do I overcome that? I mean, go.
What was the first question? How do you ask questions? Well, there's an open approach that I like to do with every situation. And I ask myself this question whenever I'm entering into any bubble. What don't I already know? What do I not know about the situation before I even enter? So before we started this podcast episode, what don't I already know? What don't I know about you? What don't I know about the topic? What don't I know about the technical stuff? What do I actually need to know here in order to even assert any leadership in the situation?
Mm-hmm.
What don't I know?
You too, huh? I was asking the same thing here.
What don't I? Because if you assume you know, now you have a problem, right? And if you assume that you know what your horse's emotional landscape is, you might tap on the right foot, the heel of the right foot, and get slapped across. Entering into somebody else's bubble, you can't assume that you are the peak of knowledge. And if you do, that's when it gets dangerous. But when you do start asking, what don't I know here? What am I assuming entering this space? That already opens the conversation. Now, if you've studied any horse psychology, or, you've studied with, like, I love Linda's model with the tense horse versus a pushy horse, you might be aware of the Pirelli approach, left brain, right brain, or any one of the variations in that situation. If you see that your horse is already tense, then you're not going to ask the horse a question that puts pressure on them. If you see that the horse is tense, you ask a question, hey, is it okay for me to touch you? And offer yourself. And if the horse touches you, then it's okay for you to touch the horse. If the horse is pushy and they're trying to push you around, you might ask, hey, can you honor this boundary that I'm setting here? Are you able to do that?
Yeah.
And bring your energy and match that energy for that horse. So you create that, how are you feeling right now? What do you need right now, bridge?
Really?
So I don't know if that answers all of those 3 questions that you posed.
Not deep enough. because you and I both know that energy doesn't have words. That you could walk into a room and people will feel your presence, good or bad.
Yeah.
I also love the idea of defining your boundaries, because so many timid people walk into a horse stall, and because the horse is so insecure, they will dominate that person.
Yeah.
And so the person's afraid to define their space from this, in its essence, bully, who's usually an insecure horse.
Yeah.
And I say, take your thumb. I don't know if you can see my thumb. If you're just listening to this, I'm making a fist, but stick my thumb straight out. And you poke him in the chest and say, no, you cannot walk over the top of me.
Yes.
And that's a physical thing that everybody has that you can say no to. I love in your book, you defined what you're saying allowing and what you say no to. It's so critical in these horses, but you don't want to go in there with an emotional shield that pushes the horse away either. You want to invite them into your bubble. So you've got the expertise. Let's hear.
Or the arrogance to say, I'm going to put my thumb there and I'm going to disregard any feedback I'm getting from you.
Yeah. You didn't have to do that.
Yeah. I find that our body language is a representation, or our bubble is our extension of our body language, and our body language is our representation of how we feel about ourselves.
Yep.
How integrated we feel within ourselves.
Yep.
And how much or little we compare ourselves to the external world. How we see the level of validity that we feel about ourselves. Do we have the right to even be here? Do I have the right to claim my space? Do I have the right, if I have the right to claim myself, my space, do you, horse, also have the right to claim your space and your bubble? And then can our bubbles meet and come together in this moment? So when we're talking about body language, or we're talking about energetic connectivity with any person or horse, we're really challenged to observe our own body language and the bubble that we create with that. Because if you keep getting feedback from the horse that they're constantly not wanting to have anything to do with you, you are essentially bringing a poison bubble into the situation. So what do you need to change around that? And those are the kinds of deep conversations and deep investigations that I do with my students, where we actually look at the horse and we look at the person and we go, okay, what is the dynamic here?
Yep.
How are your emotional landscapes clashing? Are you bringing an emotional tsunami into your horse's emotional landscape? Is your horse, as perhaps your biggest teacher, pushing all the buttons that were pushed or created for you as a child that you now need to look at? Because that can be an incredible gift that your horse can teach you. So it keeps coming back to that. It's a dance. It's an energetic dance. It's a body language dance.
Yeah.
But it's also a dance of psychology and being aware of what you bring.
Yeah, I like that. It is a dance. It's not one size fits all. It's not an on switch. You turn it on and everything's going to be right in the world. It's a constant going back and forth and adjustment.
Just like for us, our horses have insecurities. We have insecurities.
Right.
If you ask yourself, do I have insecurities, yes or no? That's not the question. The question is, where do my insecurities come up? Because they will. You might just not be aware.
So one Sunday morning, it was early. It was up in New York when I was practicing veterinary medicine up there. It was in the 90s, early 90s. And I'm working with this horse, and this woman's husband was there because it was a Sunday. So I always ask the question, so what do you do? He says, well, I'm a psychologist. I said, oh, really? I said, what is the number one mental illness in humans? I don't know, just starting a small conversation. And he instantly gave me the answer. He said the number one mental illness humans have today is a low self-esteem.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, wow. And I want to add that you'll see a horse that's more than 1 day old. What I mean by that is you're looking at a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 15-year-old. Where's their self-esteem?
Right.
And every horse lives in a hierarchy. You go out in a herd, and we've all heard about the alpha mare, and we have the one stallion, and you know, it's pretty well understood. But people don't realize that they are included in the horse's herd. That's the only way the horse, that's their operating system. You could be a Mac friend or a Windows person. Well, horses have an operating system, and it's called a hierarchical. I can't spell it. I can barely say it. And where are you in that hierarchy? And you don't have to be the most dominant, but that's where people go with their fists, with their words, with their attitudes, with their crops, whatever it is, because they want to dominate that horse. And they just don't understand that. And most of you people listening to this are women. I'm sorry, at least on the East Coast, maybe it's males. But there's a dominance, you know, the masculine versus the feminine, and the feminine's coming into a horse. And some feminine people are more dominant than other feminine people. Yeah. And there's this whole range. But we have to put all that aside. We have to look at the horse and say, okay, where are you in the hierarchy? And if he's the choleric, dominant, demanding, dictatorial, I hate stupid people, and you come in meek and timid, it's just not going to work.
Not going to work.
Yeah. But if you come in with a whip and you beat him back in the corner, have you won the battle? Maybe, but you haven't won the war.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have to do to dominate? And I say this to people all the time. How do you make a masculine man to wear pink fluffy shirt to a cocktail party? And women just sit there and they don't know. And finally they'll say, we'll make it their idea. Bingo.
Yeah.
You look so good in that shirt.
This is really your color. Wow. I've never seen any other man look so good at it.
There you go. Wait till we get home tonight.
Yeah, right. It's so interesting that you're saying that, because I have these Post-it notes everywhere. And it's this thing. Connection. Not coercion.
Yeah.
It's always this. If you have to coerce your horse, if you have to coerce your husband to wear a pink shirt, then good luck to you both and to your relationship. If you have to coerce or force your horse into submission, can you create a connected relationship regardless of how long you spend time with your horse? Because let's face it, our horses, especially if they're in herds, they're going to spend much more time with each other. You're already out of the herd by the fact that you don't spend 24 hours with each other or 23 hours or whatever. But can you create, and I think that's where the bubble, which bubble do you bring into the situation? Is it a connection bubble? Do you connect with that horse before you communicate, before you play with them? And that's such a great question. And how do we make that? How is connection actually? How does the horse? How can that one horse connect to you specifically on that individual level? Because all the horses are unique in their approaches to life and how they see and where they are in their hierarchies. But so are we. We might be a timid person at home and a raging lunatic at the barn. I don't know. Or the other way around. So how you show up matters. It keeps coming back to that. You know, do you look for that connection?
And you have the power, which is what your book is all about, getting in there and discovering that you actually have the power to create that person that's inside of you.
Yeah. People often ask me, why don't you ever get upset when people get into your face or they complain about something or whatever? I'm like, it's nothing to do with me. I hear what you're saying. That's literally all I'm saying. I hear what you're saying. If it's about me, I'll take it on board if it's relevant. If it's not relevant, I don't have to take it on board. I have that right for that. But most people, like your client's husband said, they struggle with low self-esteem. They believe that everybody's opinions matter. What I think in horsemanship is, what does your horse think about you?
Oh, ouch. Good or bad?
Good or bad? Like, does it matter what your trainer thinks of you? Does it matter? They might be having a bad day. I don't know.
You just hit on a really important subject. What does the horse think of you? And if you think that the horse loves you because you feed it,
yeah,
it's how my wife found me. She fed me home-cooked meal, and I was hooked. But then she also told me to clean my plate and take the garbage out. If you want another meal tomorrow night.
Right. So I wonder if inherent prey animals and predators deal with that feeding business a little bit differently. So, how does your horse see you if the only thing you do with them is feed them? Are you the food wagon?
Yeah.
Are you so right. What label does your horse assign to you? Is it fully functional, like just day-to-day functional, or is it leader? Is it guide? Is it predator?
And also, how are you interpreting their interpretation?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my horse loves me. Why? Because he came up to the front of the stall and took the carrot out of your hand?
Yeah. I have an alpha mare in my little herd of 3. And when I go to the paddock, he's not the first to come to me. He's like, what are you doing here today? So I have the bubble. The more submissive horses come to me first. And then the leader comes and says, oh. But then when we get into play, when she realizes that it's actually fun, she is the most engaged person. And you can, if you were to anthropomorphize her, what she would be saying to me, she's like, she'd be doing the yes and game from, theater sports or improv. And she goes like, yes, and look at this. Yes, and look at this. So, and that's her personality. And if I don't accept that as her right to be that way and start forcing myself on her, she's not going to offer me things. She's not going to yes and me, like in the theater sports. She's not going to say, yeah, and look at what else I can do for you. She's just going to go like, fine. And now I'm dragging her. Yeah.
You'd mentioned so many things. Oh, do you know anything about mares with canine teeth?
Well, I have one of those, and this is the lead mare, and this is the horse that I need to allow her to be herself. I don't know much about the physiological implications of that in terms of to do with psychology. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. This horse back here, where is it? Over here. These teeth right here in the interdental space are canine teeth, and they're usually in male horses. But when you get a mare with that, they can be independent, confident. My internet is going out.
I don't know.
Something's happening. So I apologize. Thank goodness we're reconnected. But I was just showing you the canine teeth. And when it comes to, this might be a good segue, because I'm trying to tell people that when you're trying to connect with with horses, that there are other factors, physiological factors, that may be interfering and not allowing ourselves to connect clearly. One of those is a mare with canines. They are very confident. They are, I won't say stallion-like, but they are definitely very confident. The other is food. And I just heard a really good podcast about a brother and sister. She's a Stanford Medical School graduate, and he's in the Washington, D.C. Political scene. And together they're trying to get us to be aware of what food does to us. And I'm like, kudos, that's what I've been trying to do with our horses.
Right.
And she laid out all the food that she buys at the farmer's market, and she looks at it all, and she meditates on it and says, every molecule, every atom in this food is going to become part of me and my family. And we don't think about that. But in the world of horses, if you've been following me, you know how I've been trying to get everyone away from grain, because that leads to all sorts of odd behaviors.
Yes.
And I'm just getting into this about how fructose, which is the fruit sugar, we can actually make. You and I can make it in certain conditions. And one of the side effects of fructose is this foraging behavior, which includes aggression and want to move away and get more food.
Yes.
And I know Linda has been exposed to my thoughts on this, and she's realizing that to get a good connection, you have to have good wiring, good Wi-Fi signal, good whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And there are tips and tricks for how we can control our innards, but if it's being short-circuited, we're not going to get there.
Yep.
So that's my 2 cents. Get your house in order. Get your sleep. Stop eating junk food. Start eating good food. And then when I say all that, the gal who worked with me for 13 years eats junk food. I mean, if it's junky, she'll eat it. If there's any nutritional value, she doesn't. Yes, she could connect with a horse like that better than anybody I've ever seen. So it's not the be-all and end-all. And I can't explain her. She's just gifted.
Yeah.
But most of us, if we're not connecting, let's at least clear the deck. Let's get our own house in order, which is both physical, the food we eat, sleep. Well, I can't. I'm a woman. I'm over 50. I can't sleep. Or you're on medications, or you're sick, or you have chronic pain, and you have all these things. You have to just get rid of all that, because how can you have a good conversation with your horse or with anybody if you're chronically being distracted?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And just for the benefit of all of our, well, sometimes 45 plus listeners who are going through the menopause, I will say with the deep chest voice of personal experience, it's not if you can sleep, it's how you can sleep. So I get it, the struggle's real, but find out how can I sleep? How can I rest? How can I show up as rested version of myself to the horse if I can't sleep at night? How can I make it happen? So it's not about if you can do something good for yourself, it's how can I contribute to this situation with my horse in a positive way. But I agree, you're right. You can't overlook the basics and think that there's a magic bullet to something that's going to be the biggest lever, because actually the biggest lever for your horsemanship, whatever you want to do with your horses, is you showing up as the most whole version of yourself and bringing good energy into it.
I'm crossing my arms only because I just feel comfortable. I'm not blocking you. Don't read my body language. I'm like, whoa, this gal knows what she's talking about. And I know that a lot of my listeners are having difficulties. I mean, this is where your forte comes in. These people want to be good with their horses, but they have a toxic relationship at home.
Yeah.
Forget about what happened when they were young. They're having it happen right now. They've got a boss. They've got a deadline. They're worried about the elections in our country in November, and they can't focus on that horse in that stall in that moment. And I think I'd like you to talk to me simply about one tiny, tiny thing. How does somebody become present?
Yeah. That's a great question. And there are as many answers as there are people, but I can tell a story if that's helpful.
Sure.
And that might illustrate this. So you look at a friend of mine who has a toxic relationship at home, and her horses are her saviors. And when she gets out of the house, which is whenever he's not there, as in she has the right to own her own activities, that he's not leeching on her life and energy, she goes to the barn and she's feeling exhausted. She's feeling emotional, like this is her own, the only place where she can catch a breath. And now that energy is brought to the horses, which means that now the horses, there's a lot of pressure on the horses to give her that experience. And I get that. No judgment, zero judgment here.
Right.
And the answer in how can you not bring that to the horse, or how can you be with your horse at most present, at most yourself, as your most whole self, is to learn to put boundaries in between, to put things into containers, that I'm going to leave my tiredness, my abusive relationship or controlling relationship at home. I'm going to leave my politics at home. When I go to the barn, I'm going to bring just myself. And before I even start doing anything, I'm going to take a second, make sure that I can actually be who I am, not what my neighbors think about my husband and his controlling way, not what my workmates think about the politics that's going on. My horse has nothing to do with those things. My horse is not my partner. My horse is also not my therapist. My horse is my horse.
Right. I would like to underline that.
My horse. Yeah. I'm going to meet my horse as who he or she is.
Yep.
Who is my horse? Am I today meeting my horse? Am I asking my horse, how are you feeling right now? What do you need right now? Am I asking that of myself? If I need to take a mental health day today and not train my horse and just sit with my horse in the paddock, that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to bring that baggage. If I can't leave that baggage at home, I'm not going to take more from the bank account with my relationship with my horse than I can deposit.
Yeah. You know, that bank account thing is really a key thing, but everyone knows that you got to have a little bit of money to make money.
Yeah.
And I find that there are two words in our English language that should be used so much more than any other words around a horse, and that is thank you. Mm-hmm. And you walk into the stall and just say thank you. Mm. And they're going to say, for what? What did I do? You're here. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate you. You're the best thing on this planet right now. Good. And as you said in your book, when you give to other people, I don't know if I want to call it neutralizes, but it brings into some sort of parity. I hate the word balance, but parity of your energies. So then you can at least ask the next question. So how are you today? Mm. And you've opened up this channel, this dialogue where they can fill your bank account back up with their presence, Just their warmth of their body and the smell of their skin can come in and make you feel whole again. Your experience as a young girl with donut was more than just knowing that you were there. It was the smell, the warmth, the grit of the dirt. It was the hair in your mouth. You know, it was all of
the mane, the feel of the mane. Oh.
And that is all valid things that are filling you up. It happens with people who are deeply in love, whether it's a body smell, a hormone, a perfume, the smell of a pie that your friend is making, your mother's making. These senses come in. We cannot just think of words because horses don't give you words. And most people are into texting. Or on a call or on a two-dimensional Zoom. But we're not getting that three-dimensional communication, that even four-dimensional communication of just the presence. And people coming in with their baggage. Oh, I can't stand what I just heard on the television or what my husband just said or, you know, what's going on in my workplace. Shut up.
Yeah.
You're shouting so loud, you're nodding and all these other things.
Yeah. Go and do something with that energy before you bring it to your horse, because you're creating a really dangerous situation by not being present, by being present with other things.
Yeah, go to the bathroom and just flush the toilet.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, go over there. If you have a fireplace, write everything down and burn that sucker.
Yeah.
And move on to other things. Every person, there are so many ways, as there are people, that you can ground yourself before you go in. I actually personally, I meditate before I even go to the barn. So if I haven't meditated, I'm not doing it.
Sure.
They don't deserve my busyness. They don't deserve my busy mind. They deserve my calm presence and my leadership that is actually helping all of us stay safe and create those safe spaces.
Yeah. Or listen to some a playlist that you put together.
Yeah.
Get in your zone. You know?
Yeah. Put your feet in the water. Wash your hands. That can be meditative for some people. Get them really, feeling into the body and bring the body present into the situation.
Push the button that says you're okay.
Yeah. For now.
Because if you want to play a mind game, a thought experiment, as people say, let's just pretend that you're listening to this podcast. And when the podcast is over and the world came to an end and you're the only person surviving, you and your horse, you don't have anything that can come in and change you. You are there with your horse. The rest of the world, the universe, the question that you have, what's beyond that? Just, it doesn't matter.
Good.
Same with your spouse, same with the guy behind the counter. I've said this before, but I went to a 7-Eleven, which is a convenience store here in America, and I started pumping gas into my rental car, and I said to Melissa, I'm going in, get some stuff. So I walk in, I get some stuff, and the guy behind the counter has this wall, right?
Yeah.
It's just like I'm just another customer. And I look at his name tag, and it's a name I cannot pronounce. And I say, and I try to give him my best go. It's just disaster. I ask, where is he from? And he says, I'm from India. And I said, wow, they have the longest lived democracy in the world. I mean, that's really special. And you're so far away from your home. It's just really, I'm grateful that you're here. I said this to him, a stranger.
Yeah.
I walk out to the car. I'm getting in the car. And the gal with me, she says, uh-oh, what'd you do now? This man is jogging over to my car, and I'm not afraid at all.
Yeah.
And I just roll the window down. He sticks his head right into my car and he says, I want to thank you so much for just being who you were today. you've made all the difference for me.
Yeah.
And we shook hands, and he almost kissed me. And off he went back into his store.
Yeah.
We can do this with our horses, with horses we've never seen.
Yes.
And I'm speaking to all the veterinarians out there who go to the barn and they have 20 horses draw blood on for a Coggins test or vaccinations or whatever. It's just routine. And you have 20 different personalities. And you're like, look, I've got an hour to do this. Let's get it done.
Yeah.
You have to go into each stall and ask if that horse, how are you doing today?
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you're here. Thank you. Yeah. And the horse will like, yeah, I was worried that you're coming in here, but what are you doing? I'm going to give you some vaccinations. I'm going to protect you against diseases that will kill you. And I'm going to do the best I can to make it as painless as possible. And you don't actually have to say that script. It can be in your mind. The energy that goes with that.
That's right.
And boom, horse is done.
Yeah.
On.
Yeah.
How do you teach that?
I love that. I would even say, okay, how would you like to be spoken to? And actually start saying those things. Because I do the same thing with my horses. Every morning they come in, I pick their feet when, so their feet can get some dry stall, good old fashioned bedding in there. And every time I'm picking the foot, I say out loud, may I have this foot, please?
Yes.
Literally.
Yeah.
And they're like, yes.
It's not so much the words.
Exactly. But I'm setting it up because my internal dialogue is polite.
Yep.
It's not saying, give me the freaking foot or else, I'm in a hurry.
Do unto others.
So even if you don't say the things out loud, although I do recommend that you learn to do that, it may seem like you're crossing the silly bridge for a bit, to other people who are observing you, talking to your horse.
Who cares?
Who cares? Join that, get on that crazy train and have a good relationship with your horse, because ultimately what your horse thinks of you matters much more.
I have a horse. I have lots of horses that I come up to him and I've got this, this looks like a pen, but pretend it's a float handle that I'm going to stick in their mouth and file the teeth. Yeah. And they're looking at it and, flames are coming out of their nostrils. I bring it up to my lips.
Yeah.
And I bring it over and touch it to their lips, to their nostril.
Yes.
I bring it back and I flip it over so they get both sides of it. And then I say, I want to stick this in your mouth. I'm going to start filing the edges.
Yeah.
Works like a charm.
Yeah.
Works like a charm. It goes from, what are you going to do with that thing? You're going to beat me to, okay, I get it. I understand that you're here to help. I trust you. I've earned their respect.
Yeah.
With such simple tasks. And I think people with low self-esteem, they don't believe that anybody could respect them. They're always feeling like they're at the bottom of the barrel. If you, as Brad Paisley said in his country song, 2 feet of limestone, a little bit of crude oil, 1,000 feet of grain underneath, and then there's me.
Yeah. Yes.
And you gotta say, you're still there. It is still you.
Yes. Yeah.
And you have goodness in your soul.
Absolutely. And actually your horse is one of those people in your life that if you give them an opportunity to observe the goodness in you, they are the ones who will see it.
Yeah.
Give them that opportunity.
That's brilliant. Can you say that again? Because if you can remember.
Well, I can say it another way. Give your horse an opportunity to see the goodness and the kindness in you, as well as your inner genius, and give yourself an opportunity to see your horse's genius.
This pause is there for you to reflect. Because it's true. If you don't feel you have a genius, or you've been calling your horse stupid or any other name that you want to apply, which is derogatory, you will never make a connection. No. I hate that horse. It's, how about this? Well, it's a thoroughbred chestnut mare. To which I say to the people who say it, I said, why are you such a racist? And they just start laughing because you're judging that horse on color, on gender, and I'm like, and on its ethnic background.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like,
Horse
no,
bigotry.
you're so insecure that you can't stand a horse like a thoroughbred who will tell you exactly how they feel.
In a millisecond, by the way, because they're so quick. There's no long burning, you know.
Let me think about that. That's a warm blood. Let me think about the thoroughbred. Don't like it.
But it is that, you know, whether you have low self-esteem and don't allow people to see the goodness in you and you don't want to recognize it, or you have a lot of big trauma in your past where you're constantly on a survival brain, then you don't want to be present with a life because you're constantly looking for those reflections. I'm not worthy or I'm not safe. Yeah. So if you can, and I know it's a big ask, but we give our horses big asks every single day. So let's give ourselves one today. If you can, for right now, can you recognize that you are worthy and that you are safe just for this moment?
Yeah.
Just for this moment. And then can you start extending that moment so that it extends into most of your everyday life? And if it's not safe to do that at home, then at least do it at barn. If it's not safe to do that at work, then at least do it with your horse. Let them see the goodness in you. Let yourself see that for right now you are safe. And that can change a lot with your horse, a lot.
And I feel that everybody on the planet can have, to borrow your time frame, a millisecond to believe that in them.
Yeah.
And I understand that people have voices that will come in and drown that thought out. Yeah. But even if you have to write it down on a card or a little sticky note, and I've got it right here in big, if you don't believe me, I have little things right there. And
I love it.
Listen before speaking.
Yeah.
It's an exercise, right? I can only lift 20 pounds with my arm. But if you keep lifting 20 pounds, at some point it'll be 25, 30, 40, 50, or in kilograms, whatever you want to say. You have to build this. Now, I walk into a stall, and you have to understand, I'm on my 52nd year with horses. Long time. I've floated over 80,000 horses. Long time. There's a Malcolm Gladwell book called, what's it called?
Oh, he has so many good books.
Where he says you have to do something for at least 10,000 times before you start to become good at it.
Yeah.
And I don't have it here. I've got it on audio. Anyway, the point is repetition is what you need to do. And you have to make a decision that I want to call that inner voice. I want to know how I'm going to do it. And if it's, writing it down on a card or listening to a song or doing whatever, and you get in that zone and then you experience what it does with a horse. Oh, this is really good. I tell people to cheerlead, don't be a coach. And the people are outside the stall saying, stand still, it'll be okay. Don't do that. It'll be fine. He's not going to hurt you. This will be over quickly. I turn to the people and say, stop coaching and start cheerleading. And they'll look at me and they're like, what do you mean? Say thank you. Be grateful. I love you. You're the best. I knew you could do it. And they go, fine. Okay. I love you. Thank you. You're the best. And the horse changes like that. And they inevitably start to cry.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet they never heard those things as a child.
No. Yeah. Ouch.
Oof.
And it doesn't matter if you've heard them as a child. You go out in the real world and you don't hear it enough.
Yeah. You may have, right. And you may have heard them and it may not have resonated with you. You may not. So they may have been said to you, but you may not have heard them as well. Yeah.
Well, I love you, Maria.
Thank you.
To think that you're on the other side of the planet and you found me and that we're so like-minded that we believe in energy with horses.
Yeah.
Blows my little mind.
I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for you.
And you too. Tell me what you do for people. I know you have a program set up. You have one specifically for horses and for other people. You're in English and in Finnish. So
we can do it in Finnish as well, for sure. Yeah. So we do through the Sumiloff Academy of Human Integration. We actually show people how to integrate themselves, whether they have horses or they don't. So it's you don't have to have horses to benefit from this. But if you do, then it's even a nicer playing field for all of us because it's more interesting and it already brings us together. Ultimately, we show our students how to bring their whole selves to their lives. Who are you? And do you remember who you are? Do you remember your power? Do you remember your magnificence? Do you remember your genius? And if you don't, why not? Why not start to live this life and make the most of it and build a life that looks like you, even if it's in a little microwave?
I don't know how you do it. I don't know because, after reading your book, I get it. There's technology, but there's so many people hurting out there. I see them all the time.
Yeah. We have 3 different ways in which we show up. And the first stage, if you have a lot of trauma, is healing. Uh-huh. You have healing, you have personal development, and you have self-mastery. There's, it's very hard to master your own life if you haven't healed. And meeting people in those bubbles is where it all begins. So it's my job, it's the job of our mentors to meet our students where they are and help them from there to the next stage of their life so they can learn to empower themselves in the process. Now, I do, of course, work with Horsemanship. In fact, we're running a clinic close by in about 6 weeks or so. And we're going to work with Liberty and preparation for riding. But it's about connection, not coercion. How can you do this in a connected way? How is everything that I do connected to who I am authentically, who my inner genius is, where I am in a healing development or self-mastery journey? There's a light that every person has within them, and whether they remember it or not, it's there. And one of the biggest pleasures and challenges in my life is to remind you of that light.
I know that your childhood was horrible. My childhood was great. And so people can say, well, gee, Geoff, you didn't have any of these traumas. You did well. And so how, look at you. You went on to become a veterinarian. Look, you're, doing international interviews and stuff. And I'm like, well, I learned something from something that I did. And this is in your book. Always take something from somewhere, even though it doesn't seem related. Yes. So I played the game of football, American football, not soccer. Yep. And in my junior varsity, which is my sophomore, and my junior year and my senior year on varsity team, we never lost a game.
Wow.
And we played against some of the biggest dudes of different races. And we knocked heads. But we had a coach that was amazing. And we built a team that was just undefeated. We had one time, just to be honest. But undefeated. And I've always gone back to that and said to myself, well, if I can be undefeated there, I can be undefeated anywhere. So that wasn't something that somebody taught me, but something that I experienced and I grabbed hold of and put in my tool chest.
Right.
And then I looked at my grandfather, who was a Dartmouth College graduate. He's, Dartmouth College is an Ivy League school. It's recognized worldwide.
Yeah.
And his son, my father, went to Dartmouth and then went to Dartmouth Business and then went to Harvard Law School. When you say Harvard Law School, oh my gosh, this is great.
Yeah.
So I had a grandfather and a father, and then there's me. And I could barely get out of high school. Right? I could barely read. I was horrible at tests. and had such a horrible, and then I quit college 3 times. I'm a 3-time college dropout, and I'm there mucking stalls for a living. How the heck did I go from there, where my self-esteem was, gosh, you're nothing like your dad or your grandfather. You're never going to get into any school. All the schools you've ever applied to have rejected you. The first college I went to, they did an experiment on me.
Right.
They said, oh, we'll take you, but, we have to try something. And I'm like, great,
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
All the things should have said I should just quit.
Yeah.
And you have people who come to you and say, I didn't get child abuse. I didn't have any of these problems. Yet I still can't achieve my dream. I'm telling you right now, if there's a person like you who could help these people get over all these obstacles and then become that voice that's inside of you to do what you have to do. I mean, I'm grateful for people like you, because I didn't have anybody. The only person I had was me. And then I married a woman who said I could be more than what I was. And just that little bit said, okay, why not? And then I had small successes, one after another after another.
Yep.
But I will tell you one thing, I worked my tail off. I had to work harder than anybody else to go all the way through and finish my undergrad degree, and then go on to vet school at Cornell and get that degree, and then go on and start working with horses and have failures and have people say, you don't know what you're doing, or I don't like what you're doing, and all those things. I'm lucky. I surrounded myself with one person who believed in me.
Right.
What do you say to all the people out there who say, I can't even get into my stall and connect with my horse? How is anybody going to help me? What do you say to those people?
Well, and I want to validate as well that not all childhood trauma is caused by abuse. So or throughout our lives, so we can have, be dismissed, our dreams be dismissed by people that we look up to. We could be constantly criticized or belittled by somebody in our lives. We could have those people in our lives. We could be overlooked. We could be compared to our siblings or our parents or our grandparents.
Absolutely.
You might have observed arguments or tension in relationships when you were growing up. Maybe you never were at the receiving end of it, but you might have observed it, or you might have observed abuse or addiction. You might have had an uncle who was a drunk and blah, blah, blah. You might have observed those things, and they might have sent subliminal messages to you that you are not worthy.
Yeah.
And most of our problems with our horses actually come from that. There's a part of you that has been conditioned, or there's a misunderstanding within you that believes that you are not worthy of everything that you can have in your life. And that is the job. That is the job that we do as mentors. That is the job that then we can hand over to our students' horses, which is see the reflection of goodness in those people who believe in you, who see you for who you are, who see the light within you. Allow your horse to be that for you. But if you can't for right now, then work with a mentor who will point it out. Yeah. Because we'll wear you down and we'll tell you how great you are. If you forgot, we'll remind you of it.
I'll tell you what, if you get up in the morning and your eyes open up, your heart's still beating, you're breathing air, that's quite a win. That is quite a win. I mean, if you can get up and go about your day and have no restrictions there, even if it's for 1 minute, you've been successful. And you
have a dear friend. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I have a dear friend who says any day above the ground is a good day. And
sure.
That's fantastic. But sometimes, the hardest things we need to hear about ourselves are the really good things, the really great things, and they can be the hardest to accept.
And it's so nice to hear from somebody who loves you. You know, whether it's a paid therapist or just someone you don't even know at a 7-Eleven store. Empower somebody. Get in the habit of empowering the people around you. Give that goodness and watch what is given to you in return.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the horse
being kind.
aids.
Right. Absolutely. And being kind is not pie. You don't run out of it. Sprinkle that magic everywhere you go. You never know when it's going to come back karmically.
I hold doors open for people I don't know.
Mm.
And if they hold them open for me, I said, thank you so much.
Mm.
Just be in the moment.
Yeah. And see what people do for you. See what your horse does for you. Thank you. Thank you for giving it your best shot today, even if it was a 7 out of 10. Thank you. I see how you're having a hard time today with something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Still appreciate the moments that you spent with me.
Mm.
These aren't that hard to do, everybody. It's kind of easy. It's just, it's like,
well, it's easy for us.
You're right. It is easy for us. And it may be very difficult for somebody who's listening to this. And that's
your trauma response. It's hard. If you cannot feel gratitude if your survival brain is activated. You are physiologically unable to engage two separate parts of your brain when you're in survival mode. But remember, for right now, can you just acknowledge that right now you're safe, right now in this second, if it's just for a second?
Yes.
And that's when the gratitude can start.
Yes.
Arising.
Yep. Let's see your book. Show us your book. There it is.
That looks familiar.
Yeah. And I will put the link for everyone to go purchase it on your Kindle or on the actual book, and get your markers out and start marking it up like I did. Because there are so many gems, and they're through these stories and examples, you'll say, oh, that's me. Oh, yeah, that's me. And I think you would have loved to see a book scribbled in with lots of notes. Because
I do.
It's easy to read. It's a lot of aha moments, and it can be almost too much information. So you might have to read it twice, or go to your website, which I'll also put up, and partake in the academy. It's the best money you'll probably ever spend to get out of your difficulties and start to uncover the real world of everything. I mean, it's not just horses, it's your whole life. It's just, you can have whatever you want, whatever you think about. But what you're thinking about, if you're not there, it's because you're not thinking the right stuff.
You have the right to your own life. You have the right to your own life.
I don't want to get dark here, but there are times in the world history where, because of who you were yes. persecuted.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that has to continue with you. Maybe you do have to leave where you are and go to another country, which my ancestors did that in 1635. They left where they were being oppressed and came all the way to this new country called America. And you've left twice, off to Ireland and then down to Australia, and you've left everything you've owned and all that you know. And there are so many people who are so scared to do that. But I have one sentence that seems to sum up everything. How's what you're doing working for you?
Yeah, right. Right.
And is it possible to change? And the answer is unequivocally yes. Yeah. Your book does a great job of explaining that.
Oh, that's great, because absolutely, that is my experience. The change, in different people's lives, it's a different journey. And to compare your own change journey to somebody else's is actually a disservice to your genius, because underneath your deepest wounds truly do lay the greatest gifts to the world.
I love
and
that.
to your horse.
It's a disservice.
Yeah.
I'd be pissed off if I were eating in my restaurant and I was treated this way.
Yes.
Who can I speak to? I want to talk to your boss. Oh, okay. I'm the boss. Well, I'm not happy with what you're doing.
I love it. I love it. I could speak with you forever. I love this conversation. I am a little bit aware of you are very busy. So
no, I just want to make sure that everyone knows Safe Spaces is the name of the book. And Merja, Merja Sumiloff, Sumiloff. Yep. And it's Sumiloff.com. And I would encourage everybody to go ahead and take the leap. If you're having an obstacle that's bugging you and you're not surrounding yourself with people, well, here's one gal right here in front of you who will take you in and help you over those obstacles. And I'm glad you teamed up with Linda and understand what Connection's all about. It's just, I'm blessed to have found both of you. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for all the service that you do for us. At the very least, if we're tuning into the podcast, we already take a lot of information just through osmosis and constantly listening. But I believe that you also have a membership program that allows like a deeper dive into the topics that you cover a lot on your podcast as well. And that is it's worth really taking a good look at. There's a lot of information in the podcast already, but if you're a nerd like myself,
I get a lot of it away for free. But if you want to talk with me one-on-one, we've got a plan for that. And people come see me all the time. They ask their questions. I found myself repeating a lot of things. But I think this type of podcast where we're going into the problems that people are having with their horse. I mean, I do nutrition and dentistry, but this thing about connection and horsemanship is everything. If you can't connect with your horse, what's the point? I mean, they're not pulling our butts into church on Sunday or downtown. We have cars for that. So, but they're so valuable, these horses, this interaction. So
we've gone from military and utility usage of horses into, I'd say probably recreational is quite an accurate word for that.
Yep.
And so we need to not see them as utility vehicles. We need to see them as those co-creators that can teach us a lot. And so we're not the teachers. We are the co-learners, the co-creators, the co-existers who can bring the best or the worst.
I like that. I like that. Co-creators. You're not alone. People are not alone. You're not just an individual. People have turned to spiritual, but there's so much around you, from the butterflies, the trees, the air that's moving past your skin, the dogs, the cats, the woodchucks, the snake that slithers by, everything. They all have something to bring. And once you become aware of that, it's really a delightful world that we live in. Delightful.
Absolutely. Yeah, take that moment. If you can, just recognize that right now you're safe and right now you are allowed to experience all that life has to offer.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to say goodbye. I know you have a full day ahead. It's your work day
8 in the morning. Yeah.
And I'm just going to wrap up for the night, and I've got a full week ahead of myself too. So thank you for spending the time here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you to your family for sharing you with us at such large volume and capacity. I appreciate it.
I'm nothing without them. Well, no, I'm everything without them, but they sure do help.
Yeah, right.
They certainly keep me in the right spot. Okay, I'm going to hang up on you now. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Yep, bye. Hey everyone, Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review. However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There's two reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.